Well, it's finally over. After 125 episodes of television and a direct-to-streaming movie, the Breaking Bad universe has finally come to an end.
What about Slippin' Jimmy?
Shut up. Shut up. I personally have been watching since the tail end of Breaking Bad, so that's coming up on around 10 years now. But Breaking Bad didn't premiere until 2008, so that's almost 15 years of unparalleled storytelling that we have been treated to. So how does it all end, and how did I feel about the ending? Instead of just covering the final episode, I'm going to be starting from the time skip and covering the last 4 episodes. So this is really more a review of the final arc. Starting with the time jump, I really didn't know how to feel about this when I first saw it live. To be completely honest, it kind of left a sour taste in my mouth because I just felt like it was cheap, and I felt like, what's the point of doing a prequel if you're gonna do a time skip? In the moment, I felt like we were never gonna see that final change, that final switch that Jimmy needed to fully embrace the Saul that we knew in Breaking Bad. Because Saul in Breaking Bad, it's almost as if he doesn't have a personal life. I mean, he mentions having multiple ex-wives, but he almost seems like he's like an NPC. Part of my problem with the time skip stemmed from the fact that I didn't know how much time we were going to spend in that Breaking Bad universe. I knew that eventually we would see some cameos from Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul, but I really expected it to be a limited scene or two featured in only one of the episodes. However, given how much time we were able to spend in the Breaking Bad timeline in the last 4 episodes, the time skip quickly stopped bothering me. The episode that kicks off Gene's final arc is Nippy, and I guess this could be considered Better Call Saul's Fly episode considering how it was received. And while I'm a big fan of the Breaking Bad Fly episode, I do feel that Nippy was one of the lesser compelling episodes of Better Call Saul, simply because I feel like it completely destroyed all the momentum that the show had been building through season 6. I mean, the 3 episodes leading up to Nippy literally end with Hamlin's death, Lalo's death, and Kim and Jimmy splitting up. To go from the climax of the entire series to the beginning of the prologue with characters like Jeff that I don't necessarily care for, I mean as much as someone like Howard or Kim, it's gonna be a little slow to start out, and I understood that. And to be completely honest, these writers are shooting 99% from the field, so to be critical about one episode that I felt was a little slow would just be extremely nitpicky and just unproductive. Luckily, the next episode, Breaking Bad, gave us what we've all been waiting for. 40-year-old Aaron Paul playing 25-year-old Aaron Paul. No, but in all seriousness, I thought the flashback scenes, not only in this episode, but the final 3 episodes were done really well.
Dude, to stand in front of a meth lab, it's not like he ain't gonna put 2 and 2 together.
He is on a need-to-know basis.
Oh, I didn't want to show my face. Did he need to know that?
Walt and Jesse's banter in the RV perfectly captures their season 2 relationship, which is a big testament to Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul that they can not only transition seamlessly back into these roles, but also back into the specific point on the timeline they need to be, considering these characters' attitudes and mannerisms change very subtly every season. And I didn't necessarily feel that way from the flashback in El Camino. The best part about these flashbacks is they serve more to the story than just saying, hey, remember that this happened? This RV scene is interesting because while Jimmy didn't physically end up in the grave they dug for him, this moment was the one that sealed his fate in Breaking Bad and for the rest of his life. So even though Jimmy physically ends up driving away in the RV, his future rests in the grave. The next flashback with Mike in his office is to parallel his conversation with Jeff telling him not to go after the guy with cancer. It's dangerous, it's wrong. But Saul doesn't care. Saul lives by one motto: just make money. The end of the episode where him walking into the school is cut with him breaking into the house further signifies how detrimental this is going to be for Gene's future. We know the consequence for him walking into that school, and the cinematography is telling us that the consequence for this scam is going to be of similar proportions. It's amazing when they can create meaningful story beats out of a flashback instead of just going, hey, remember when Saul tracked down Walt at the school? Well, here's him walking through the front door. The phone call with Francesca and Kim was a fantastic scene, but again, for whatever reason, the Slippin' Gene stuff just didn't really captivate me as much as some of the other storylines. However, it was necessary to set up what follows. The penultimate episode in the series is a Kim-centric episode, and for me really helped build back some of that momentum that it lost after the time jump. We learn about where Kim has been and what her life is like, and it's pretty dull in comparison. She gets a call from Gene, which gives her the motivation to finally rid her guilty conscience about Howard.
Yeah. Time to sing. Okay.
I like how when she's traveling through Albuquerque, it's like a wasteland, as if the fallout from Saul and Heisenberg nuked the surrounding area and all that remains. Knowing she's safe from other witness testimony and the fact that Saul is already a wanted fugitive, she can confess on the record without threat of prosecution by the DA. However, she also hand-delivered a confession to Howard's wife and now puts herself in the crosshairs of a civil suit. After that is quite possibly Ray's finest display of acting on the show, which is saying something considering—
Hey, let's let Jimmy dig around the fire-damaged wreck where his brother died screaming! And then let's let him pick up a keepsake or two! That is so fair!
If you don't trust your men with your money, you have bigger problems than if you trust Saul Goodman.
You'll never do that again!
Yeah, maybe I won't. And maybe next time you call, I won't come.
There you go. Kick a man when he's down.
Jimmy, you are always down.
Yeah. This moment is crucial to establishing why Kim had to go as far as she did. She could have went to the courthouse, put her statement on the record, and just went back to Florida. But because she knew the DA would sit on it, and because of how much this weighs on her conscience, she had to make sure she went that extra mile to do right by the people she wronged. And with this weight lifted off her shoulders, she can't help but break down on the bus back home. We go from that scene to Gene's home invasion, and we are treated to possibly the funniest scene in the Breaking Bad universe, other than the dinner scene with Walt, Jesse, and Skyler. Over 4 full minutes of building the suspension with the cop car pulling up behind Jeff before revealing that the cops are on a meal break, and Jeff ends up pulling off and getting into an accident.
Somebody in their face with it.
Charlie 14, can you advise when you're 1016? Frank, you stand by to 1083 to the house. Be advised of bringing out the last of it now. ETA 5 minutes.
Better Call Saul rarely deals with absurd slapstick comedy like this. It's more dialogue driven.
I don't want
Just
it.
look at it, sir. Just look. What do you see?
A man fucking a horse.
So this moment caught me completely off guard, and I just busted out laughing. There's 2 flashbacks in this episode. One is a scene where Kim is in Saul's office finalizing the divorce papers, and Saul is incredibly cold and dismissive to Kim.
Well, have a nice life, Kim.
Saul is putting on a mask to deal with his emotions as shown in the other flashback of this episode, which shows Saul clearly stressing about this meeting he has with Kim. Completely different than how he was acting with her in the room. The scene with Kim and Saul ends with Kim having a brief conversation with Jesse. Being able to have these 2 characters on screen together, the 2 main supporting characters for each of their respective shows, one at the end of their journey and the other just beginning, the 2 characters that were poisoned by the ideals of their counterparts, and 2 characters who I personally root for anytime they are on screen. It was just a treat. Outside the office, it's not just raining, but it is pouring, as Jesse points out.
It's crazy. Like bananas all this rain.
This is the Waterworks happening inside Kim that we saw manifest itself earlier on the bus. She barely gives Jesse the time of day, not even looking in his direction as he tries to make conversation. But within her is a swell of emotions that stem from the fact that she doesn't even recognize Jimmy anymore. Last time she saw or had a conversation with Jimmy McGill was in their apartment. She doesn't even know this person. She looks upon him as if he's a stranger, and to back it up, that's how Saul treats her. This point is hammered home at the end of Jesse and Kim's conversation.
This guy, any good?
When I knew him, he was.
This episode ends with Gene getting the cops called on him and going back on the run. Now, we have reached the final episode. And for their longest episode, they don't waste a single moment. It begins with an amazing flashback which acts as both a perfect last scene for Mike and the beginning of a reoccurring theme about time travel and regrets that scatter this episode. We're taken back to the desert during the Bagman episode and get to spend time with Jimmy and Mike as they rest near a fresh water source. Jimmy toys with the idea of stealing the $7 million, to which Mike responds,
It's not ours.
Could be.
Then Jimmy asks Mike if he could go back in time, where would he go? Jimmy is expecting a superficial answer like ancient Rome or Civil War, but Mike's mind is elsewhere, thinking upon past mistakes and things that he would change. His gut reaction is to pick
December 8, 2001.
the date of his son's murder, but then he revises his answer to
March 17th, 1984. Day I took my first bribe.
Mike believes that to be the choice that put him on his bad choice road all his life. It's important to remember that Mike blames himself and accepts that it's his actions that caused all of the consequences that he faced later in life. One, because it parallels someone in another flashback we'll discuss later, and two, because this theme of not getting a happy picture-perfect ending and instead facing the consequences of your actions has and will be prominent to how the story ends. Jimmy then expands on what he would do, which is basically go back in time and play the stock market to become a billionaire. Mike looks at him as if he's crazy. You were almost assassinated. The blood is still on your shirt and you're talking about money? The final exchange between Jimmy and Mike is one of the best in the show. It perfectly captures Jimmy's descent into Saul Goodman that we've seen over the last 6 seasons into only 4 lines.
That's it, honey.
What else?
Nothing you change.
I'm rested.
Those 2 little words, I'm rested, carry so much weight. I can't get over how good the writing in this scene is. It's quite honestly might be my favorite line in the entire series because of how much it represents Jimmy's character at this moment. We know he's lying when he says he's rested, but he doesn't care. Gene is quickly picked up by the cops and is negotiating a plea deal when Marie is brought in. And I love how in black and white, you know exactly what color that coat is. My initial reaction to this was, Marie and Saul never interacted in Breaking Bad, so she doesn't really have a strong connection here. But the more I thought about it, I realized that Marie never got to confront anybody who played a role in Hank's death face to face. Walt died, Jack died, Todd died, Jesse was on the run, so I really liked that her character was able to get some sort of closure in this way, even though Saul didn't directly kill Hank, and he wasn't even in the desert during the time of his death. Then Saul pulls out his trump card. He's gonna play victim to Walter White in hopes of splitting the jury, resulting in a mistrial. The prosecutor is reminded in this moment that this isn't just some criminal. This is like scam lawyer Jesus he is sitting across from. Saul knows what he's talking about, and he gets his way in court through any means necessary. By going to court, no matter how much evidence they have, they would be playing his game, so they continue negotiations. Saul gets all the way down to 7 years, and then he starts to argue for his mint chocolate chip ice cream. As the YouTube channel Illogical so brilliantly points out in their breakdown video about this ice cream, the mint chocolate chip, or more specifically the color green, is used to signify Saul is on go mode. He's scamming, he's making a profit, doing classic Saul things, which is exactly what he's been doing during this negotiation. If you want an even more deep and extensive breakdown for Better Call Saul, you need to check out Illogical because I truly believe no one is competing with the depth of his analysis. Saul is informed that Kim has already spilled the truth about Howard and no longer has leverage to argue for this ice cream. He no longer has leverage as Saul. We're then thrown into another flashback after Walt and Saul were taken in by the vacuum repairman. Again, Saul proposes the time machine question to Walter, and after berating Saul for such a stupid question, he tells Saul about leaving gray matter, but frames it in a way that puts the blame on Gretchen and Elliot. Keep in mind, the day before this, he witnessed Hank's murder, wrestled with his wife and son on the ground with a knife, and then kidnapped and abandoned his own daughter before changing identities. Some people interpreted this as he doesn't care about the events of Ozymandias, but it's much like Mike not wanting to go back to the time of his son's murder. He not only blames the leaving of his company for his underachievement, but everything else that transpired throughout Breaking Bad. Although, the key difference between Mike and Walter in these scenes are that while Mike blames himself for his actions, Walter still blames others. Saul responds with a new regret, different from what we heard with Mike, a slip and fall he pulled that ruined the health of his knees. Saul doesn't actually express any regret in pulling the scam, just getting injured. Walt is taken aback by this story and ends the scene with another amazingly layered line of dialogue.
So you were always like this?
Saul is struck with emotion as Walt, in his last scene, affirms the thing his brother had been trying to tell him his whole life.
I know what you were, what you are. People don't change. You're slipping Jimmy.
Now, Saul is being flown back to New Mexico for trial, and this is an extremely pivotal moment in Saul's motivation. At the beginning of the scene, he's still planning on accepting this 7-year deal and taking his win, but after learning that Kim has opened herself up to a civil suit because she hand-delivered her testimony to Howard's widow, something changes in Saul. Kim called his bluff on the phone. She could have just confessed and the DA would have sat on it and Cheryl never would have found out, but her motivation was not to set the record straight legally, but to make sure the lies that she told met the ears of the people that they affected.
Why are you doing this?
And this inspires Jimmy to do the same. Jimmy lies and says he has more information on Kim's involvement in order to get Kim to come to the courthouse. The scene in the courthouse is Jimmy's true confession of regret. We've seen him twice now in this episode and throughout the last few seasons hide his true regrets, whether that be about Kim or Chuck or Howard, until this moment when he finally confesses. This is a confession of regrets, not crimes, even though there's plenty of overlap. That is why when he's finished, Bill says,
"What was all that? That thing with your brother, that wasn't even a crime."
It was.
A funny line on the surface, but to Jimmy, it was a crime. It was a crime to his soul. It was a crime to his conscience. And sure, he's talking at the judge, but he's speaking to Kim. He's laying everything out on the table in front of her after ensuring that she would be in attendance because he's no longer chasing the mint chocolate chip ice cream or chasing his life as Saul Goodman. He certainly could have, but he chose not to. He's finally answered the question he proposed to Mike in the beginning. What else? Releasing himself from the shell he's been hiding in called Saul Goodman and emerging while taking complete ownership of all the things he had done in front of the one person who matters most to him. This is the moment Kim finally recognizes Jimmy again after years of looking upon him as a stranger. The final flashback between Chuck and Jimmy is another amazing display of layered dialogue. I mean, they really crushed it this episode with these moments. Chuck continues the theme of regret and changing the past by telling Jimmy,
If you don't like where you're heading, there's no shame in going back and changing your path.
Oh, when have you ever changed your path?
Jimmy sees starting over as failure because in this moment, he wants nothing more than to be like Chuck and to be respected by Chuck. Jimmy's unwillingness to change course is a result of his brother seeming to have it all figured out, but Chuck does not have it all figured out. This is a man whose wife left him and is now living with a perceived illness. As shown by Chuck's possession of the Time Machine book, Chuck is someone who often considers the question proposed by Jimmy early in the episode. If you could go back, what would you change? Jimmy sees Chuck as having it all figured out even when he's dropping off his groceries because Chuck can't go outside. Chuck then responds to Jimmy,
We always end up having the same conversation, don't we?
I'll see you tomorrow, Chuck. And I might have the Financial Times.
Of course, we as an audience know what tomorrow brings for these brothers, and it's a result of the same conversation being had between Chuck and Jimmy. I really can't say enough about how much I love these flashbacks and what they represent. I really think it adds so much to the ending. Then following is the scene with Jimmy and the prisoners where they all chant "Better Call Saul" as the prophecy foretold. There's an interesting exchange between Jimmy and the guy in front of him where the guy keeps calling him Saul while Jimmy insists he is no longer Saul.
Better Call Saul. Right?
McGill.
What?
I'm McGill.
Don't give me that. You're Saul.
This is part of Jimmy's life sentence. Not only is he behind bars, but even after his confession, he cannot shake the perception of being Saul Goodman. That's all he will be for the rest of his life to everyone except for Kim. But Jimmy accepts that at this point, no one else's opinion matters. Then, the final scene with Kim and Jimmy. It is amazing how subtle the performances from both Ray Seahorn and Bob Odenkirk are, and how emotionally powerful this scene still is. Kim sounds as if she's talking to a ghost, like someone who died years ago is standing in front of her.
Hi, Jimmy.
Kim mentions how she had to lie and use her expired New Mexico bar card to pose as Jimmy's lawyer to gain this access. We can see that toxic, slippin' Kimmy, slippin' Jimmy behavior that eventually was their downfall is always going to be there and a threat to them. And even after years later, they are still bad for each other. Then they share a cigarette in a way that directly mirrors Kim's introduction in season 1. This exchange is so much more meaningful than any cheesy kiss or embrace they could have done. Kim's hands shake as she hesitates to light the cigarette, knowing both the cigarette and their relationship will lead to cancer. Jimmy, with the cigarette in his mouth, accepts that truth. The spark is the first hint of color shown throughout any of these black and white scenes. Kim has finally found her way back into Jimmy's life, and the color is slowly starting to return. The final sequence of Kim exiting the prison is left purposely ambiguous. They share a meaningful gaze before Saul pulls out the finger guns, a reference to the moment in both Jimmy and Kim's lives where they were both fully in the game. In this moment, however, it feels more like a hollow gesture with Jimmy being trapped in a cage. I don't think Jimmy is saying he's back in the game, nor do I even think he's saying that him and Kim should or will get back together. It's more of a gesture to Kim that says, well, we knew what we were getting ourselves into. And also that even though they are bad for each other, even if they can't be together, Jimmy will always love and care for Kim. And Kim exchanges one final look while subtly returning the same finger gun back to Jimmy before walking into her future. Now, I want to give my interpretation of what happens next. I think unfortunately Kim does get sued by Hamlin's wife and suffers massive damages. This originally bothered me because out of everyone in the show, I wanted Kim to have a happy ending similar to how Jesse got one. Sure, they had done terrible actions throughout the course of the show, but I felt like they were really a victim of the people surrounding them. But then I remembered what happened to Nacho. If you're in the game, you accept the consequences. Just like everyone else, Nacho was given the opportunity in his final moment to confess not regrets, but all the things he did to hurt the Salamancas and how much he despised them, and then accepts his fate, taking matters into his own hands. This is the difference between Breaking Bad's ending and Better Call Saul's ending. Everyone must face the music. There's no riding off into the sunset or dying among your one true love. There's just consequences. And I think it's well placed. I think after everything we've gone through, a happy ending with sunshine and rainbows just would not have felt appropriate for a story like this. Instead, the ending is bittersweet, with these two people who have a deep connection to each other, but know that they could never be together again. I thought the ending was incredible. I thought the entire series was incredible. I cannot believe the skill of these writers. They constantly blow my mind with how they craft their stories and characters. One thing I have to ask though is please let this universe go. It's perfect, wrap a bow on it, give it a kiss, and send it off into the ether as a perfect display of how to tell a story. If you made it this far in the video, throw up a moai in the comments so I know who the real ones are. Let me know what you all thought about the ending as well, and please subscribe as over 99% of you aren't subscribed. Thanks for watching.